Alrighty, welcome everyone. This is very exciting. To start a new Sefer here, we learned together, many of us, Megillas Rus, which was enjoyable. Sefer Daniel is very different, which is why I picked it, because it's something which is, it's the land of the unknown, or it's Sefer that is not often chosen to be studied. Probably for two reasons. One is that half the Sefer is written in Aramaic. There are 12 chapters in Sefer Daniel. Half of them are Aramaic, from Perek Beis to, I think, Zion is in Aramaic. And then the other 6, Aleph, and then Zion through, and then Ches through Yud Beis is in Hebrew. So that makes for learning it without just reading straight English a little difficult. You have another one? Okay. And the other reason is probably because some people are familiar with some basic stories from Sefer Daniel, which is Daniel being thrown into the lion's den and Daniel being thrown into an oven. Okay, so that's, so if you have those, those are exciting stories, but if you're satisfied with that, then why read on, right? But there's actually a lot more here. And I want to try to touch on a lot of these. There's really some very fascinating stories here. Some more well-known, some less well-known, and there are also just a lot of yesodostic things here. It happens to be the first parak is not as eventful, I'll say, if I could say such a thing, but we're going to learn the entire Sefer. I'm going to do a little bit of a different style than we did for Megillas Rus. For Megillas Rus, we literally read every single pasuk, and I tried to fill it in with some pirushim as we went along. Once we hit the Aramaic, I'm not going to read every single pasuk. I hope that's okay, no matter how familiar we are with Gemara or not. Or just Aramaic in general, I'm gonna just pick certain psukim, and I'll say what they are beforehand, and we'll learn them together and try to get more the general idea of what's happening. For the first parak, it's not such a long parak, 20 psukim, so we're gonna read all the psukim inside. But going on for next week, we might even finish the first parak this week, and we get into the second parak, we'll discuss more of the concepts and more the mafarshim. So basically, the way Sefer Daniel is divided up is the first 6 prakim are stories about Daniel, and the last 6 prakim are, we'll call them nevuas, but we'll discuss that, whether they're really nevuas or not, but there's some kind of predictions for the future about Mashiach and Achris Hayamim. Whether it falls into the category of real nevuah, we'll discuss when we get there, but that's basically how it's broken up. So really, we're just in story mode, essentially now. And we're going to begin, before we start the Sefer, it's necessary just to do one short introduction, which is the Nebuchadnezzar, who was the king of Bavel, came into Eretz Yisrael, we know, and destroyed the first Beis HaMikdash. Now, without getting into too many of the details, one general concept that's important to know is that Nebuchadnezzar came into Israel on 3 different occasions. It wasn't just like he invaded and then destroyed the Beis HaMikdash and carried off the captives, and that was the end of the story. So he invaded on at least 3 occasions, and according to some Mefarshim, maybe even 4. The first time he invaded was one of the last kings of Yehuda, whose name was Yehoyakim. Yehoyakim was the 3rd to last king, and Nebuchadnezzar invaded at least once, maybe twice, depending on how you learn it. But he invaded one time during his reign, and he did not destroy the Beis HaMikdash. It wasn't an invasion to kill anyone. It was just a conquest, okay? And they conquered Eretz Yisrael to a certain extent, and Yehoyakim was under the authority of Nebuchadnezzar. He was still the king, but he basically he was still the king of Israel, but he had to answer to Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, that's round 1. A number of years later, 8, possibly 11, again, we're not learning Sefer Malachim now, but at some point later, by the next king, who was Yehoiakim's son, his name was Yehoiachim. So you have Yehoiakim, and then Yehoiachim. Nebuchadnezzar invaded again. During this invasion, during the times of Yehoiachim, what occurred was he actually brought back certain captives with him to Bavel. Okay? The way the pasuk says it is, he brought back all of the workers and all of the important people. The way Chazal, famously in the Gemara, interpret this is, he brought back all of the Talmidei Chachamim, right? That's the concept that Mordechai was brought at that point to Bavel at that time, okay? And then eventually ended up in Persia. Okay, that's the second time he invaded. Still, Beis HaMikdash is standing, okay? So Nebuchadnezzar has taken Jews back from Israel back to Bavel, and there's still a Beis Hamikdash in Eretz Yisrael. 11 years after that, there is a third king, and that is Tzidkiah. So the three kings again is Yehoiakim. He conquers him, and he's in charge of him. Yehoiachin, he carries away a lot of important people, either spiritually or physically. And then the third time is Tzidkiah. And when he invades during Tzidkiah, that is when he puts the siege around the city, which is when we have Asar B'Teves to commemorate that. And when he then eventually moves in and we have Tisha B'Av and he destroys the Beis Hamikdash. So there are 3 times he comes to Yerushalayim. So why do I say that? Just because the first pasuk here is going to put Daniel in perspective and say, okay, so there's this person, Daniel, why is he living in Babel? So it says, beginning pasuk Aleph, Bishnas Shalosh L'Malchus Yehoiakim Melech Yehuda. So in the 3rd year of the king of Yehoiakim, Nebuchadnezzar Melech Babel Yerushalayim Vayatzar Aleha. So Nebuchadnezzar comes to Yerushalayim during this time. Yehoiakim is the king. He's the 3rd to last king of the Bnei Yisrael. And Nebuchadnezzar lays siege to Yerushalayim. And what happens? Pasuk Beis, Vayitein Adonai biyado es Yehoiakim Melech Yehuda. So Yehoiakim is delivered into his hands, whether that means he actually took him back to Babel or he was just in his authority. That part is kind of subject to machlokas. He clearly did bring back some of the kalim of the Beis Hamikdash, and he brings them back to Babel, and he puts them in some kind of temple. And some of the kalim he puts in some kind of temple storage. Okay. So here we are. Nebuchadnezzar is in Babel at this point, and it's going to seem like there, and he's in charge of Eretz Yisrael. So he then approaches this person named Ashpenaz. Who is Ashpenaz? Rav Sarisav. He's in charge of something. He's some kind of head officer. And what does Nebuchadnezzar ask Ashpenaz to do? He asks him to bring certain Jews from Eretz Yisrael and bring them to him. Yiladim asher ein bahem kol mum v'tovei mar'eh. So these are children or youths, we'll call them, in very good condition, who look good, umaskilim b'chol chachma, they're very wise, okay? V'yodei das umavine mada, they know lots of things, they're very knowledgeable people. Va'asher koach bahem lamod b'heichal hamelach. And they also need to have the physical endurance to stand in the presence of the king. Ulalamdam Sefer ulashon kazdim. And what is he going to do with them? He's not going to torture them and kill them. He wants to teach them the language and to teach them about Babel. What is his agenda? So some Mefarshim say his agenda is that he's going to kind of prep these youths. Okay, they're very wise, they're very able, okay? And what's he going to do? He's going to train them, so to speak, and perhaps he can send them back to Eretz Yisrael, because remember, he hasn't destroyed Eretz Yisrael. He can send them back, and they can kind of operate there as like a satellite for Nebuchadnezzar, because they'll be like originally Jews, but they'll be completely brainwashed and trained by Nebuchadnezzar, and then he'll send them back to Eretz Yisrael, and they'll operate for him, and whatever they'll do for him there, I guess, get everyone perhaps on the Babel side, or whatever the concept is, okay? So this is his idea. Okay, yeah, perhaps, yeah. Okay, I apologize. Do you want to get us Sefer? Okay, fine. Okay. I didn't print my Makomos or anything. Pause. Okay. So now here's where things start to get interesting. Vayaman lahem hamelech dvar yom b'yomo. So the king prepares for these youths. Now, how old are they? So we don't really know how old they are. They could be young children. The Ibn Ezra comes to the conclusion that we're going to see in a moment, Daniel and his friends are 15 years old. Okay, I don't know if everyone there is 15, or he just somehow comes to the conclusion that Daniel's 15. We don't really know. The pasuk doesn't really tell us. It's not so clear how old Daniel was at many points in the story, but perhaps 15. He's definitely a youth. Okay, the Ibn Ezra comes to the conclusion. He says they are 15. He says that Mefurish. He says v'lo nimtzu b'yeled pachos mitesvav shana. It can't be that they are considered a youth under 15. Okay,
They got to be at least.
At least 15, correct. And that's right. Presumably, though, they're not that much older, because at a certain point, you're going to be you're not a yeled anymore, you're an ish. I assume that's so. So you're right. We have a minimum, all right, but we don't know what the maximum is. Okay. So the king now has these boys who he's training. And what does he do? He appoints that every day they're going to be served a royal meal, some kind of dish. And this dish is called pasbag. Now, what exactly is pasbag? So the Mefarshim go to town trying to figure this out. Rashi says it's some kind of food. It may not necessarily be so important at this point, although it's going to be questionable whether is the food treif or is it some other food, right? Meaning if it's just bread baked by the king, so it's not treif. If it's some other cooked dish, some fancy Babylonian, food, chalent or something like that, so then it's potentially treif. Okay, so that will play into it in a moment. Umiyein mishtav, and wine. So they're giving them some kind of food and some wine. Ulegadlam shaloshanim. They're going to prepare them for 3 years. Umiktsasam yamdu lifnei hamelech. And at the end of the 3 years, they're going to be brought before the king. So they're going to have a 3-year training, essentially, where they're going to feed them and teach them and get them in shape. And then at the end of 3 years, they're going to be brought before the king, perhaps to see whether they're, fit for their role. Vayihi bahem ibnei Yehuda, and amongst these youths who were brought is Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. Okay, so these are 4 names. Please get them familiar. We're going to see a lot of them. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. They're not the only ones, but they are of the 4, and apparently there's something unique about them, which is why they're going to kind of take over in terms of the focus. Just an interesting thing. My oldest son, his name is Daniel. So when I was in 10th grade in TA, Rabbi Rattenberg came in. Rabbi Rattenberg was the one who was in Baltimore, was like Masada, all the Gittin. So he's very big into like names, because for divorce, you have to be into what people's names are, how you spell it. So he pointed something out then, I never forgot it. And I don't know what the pshat in this is, but many people pronounce the name Daniel, right? Like Malki-el, right? Gavri-el, right? So God is my whatever, God is my blank, right? So Daniel would be like God is my judge, I guess, okay? It's interesting. The name Daniel, the A Nakuda is not under the Aleph. It's actually, if you look if you have a Navi, you see it's in Dani Yale, right? Dani Yale. So I don't know if that changes the meaning. Most people say it does have something to do with judging. I don't myself, even I name my son. I don't know exactly why it's like that, but the name is not Dani Yale, it's Dani Yale. Okay, I'm not, I don't make a point to call my son that like carefully, but that's the name. So now we know. All right, little known fact. They changed, really. They did it. Okay, there you go. Yeah, but if you look in all the older Tanakhs, they always put that. And Rabbi Rattenberg pointed that out to us. It doesn't make a difference for writing it in a get anyway, because there's no Nakudos in a get. But he said it was an interesting fact that people don't know. Okay, pasuk zayin. Vayasem lahem sar hasarisim shemos. So now they actually gave them new names. Vayasem leDaniel Belt Shatzar. They renamed Daniel Belt Shatzar. UleChananya Shadrach. UleMishael Meshach. Ula Azariah Aved Nego. Okay. So these are all Babylonian names. Okay.
His name is similar to his own grandson.
Very good. So excellent. So the Ibn Ezra and others pick up on this. The name Belt Shatzar is similar to one of the kings we know. There's going to be a big story about him. Bel Shatzar, right? So the Ibn Ezra, I think it is here, who says that obviously that makeup of letters like tsar, shatzar, obviously in Babylonia had some kind of meaning. So he says Belt Shatzar was the name of an idol, was the name of a god, Babylonian god. Okay. And the others, he says, some of Farshim say the names Shadrach, Meshach, Aved Nego mean something similar to their Hebrew names. And some of Farshim say, no, they're all just different idols. But it's clear that the name Belt Shatzar, everyone seems to agree that Belt Shatzar, which is the name of Daniel, seems to be like a very important idol. So he is he's with Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, but he seems to be being pinned out, pulled out as someone maybe perhaps above the rest. Okay? Vayasem Daniel al libo. So Daniel now takes this to heart. Asher lo yizga'al bepas bag hamelech. He does not want to defile himself by eating these foods. Uviyein mishtav. Vayivakesh misar hasarisim asher lo yizga'al. So he speaks to the head officer and he says, this is fantastic that you're giving me, luxury, 5-star breakfast here, but every day, but I'm not really interested. And in fact, instead of getting in a fight with him and saying, who do you think you are? The Sar Hasarisim seems to, he likes Daniel for some reason. Hashem makes it that way, that he likes him. And Vayomer Sar Hasarisim LeDaniel. He says to him, look, Yarei ani es Adoni hamelach, asher mina es ma'achalchem ve'es mishtechem. between you and me, he says, I'm scared, right, of Nebuchadnezzar. Asher lama yir'eh es penechem zoafim min hayeladim asher kigilchem. He says, if it's between you and me, I'm happy not to give you the food. It's fine. He says, what's going to happen though? You're not going to eat the food, and it's physically going to affect you. And when time comes for you to go in front of Nebuchadnezzar, right? That's the end of me, right? My head is off. I'm done. Because he's going to know that you're rejecting his food, and that's going to be a total affront to the king. So I don't really care, but I'm just saying I'm going to get the blame for this, and I can't have such thing. So it's worth pointing out at this point, before we move forward, we're about halfway through the parak at this point, what is it that Daniel, why is it that he doesn't want to eat the food? So this gets into something very important, which really hinges on the question of what exactly is this pasbag, okay? If it's not kosher food, so obviously he can't eat not kosher, but the question which many deal with, and it's worth thinking about, there's no real conclusive answer, doesn't seem to be, but it's discussed, is he required to not eat this food, or is this something that he's going out, that he's going more than he needs to? Okay, good. So at this point, there's no worship of idols, right? There's no worship of idols. They're giving him food. Now, some say that Nebuchadnezzar that Daniel realizes, oh, my name is Belteshazzar. That's the name of like an idol. And I forgot which pirush it says that the food they were giving him also was like prepared for either for an idol, or that they at least had it in mind when they prepared it for him. Now, if that's the case, then eating the food is already dabbling in avodah zarah. And we know that, right, avodah zarah, gilui arayos, and shfichas damim are the three things a Jew has to give up his life for. So that would be self-explanatory then why he says, look, I'm not eating. I'm not doing it. I'm going to die. I won't look healthy. Who cares? If I have to, I'll die, right? Okay. Another possibility is that it's not avodah zarah food. It's just not kosher. It could be not kosher food. If it's not kosher food, so if he's really going to die, he could eat it. Okay? So there's two possibilities here. One thing is that we know there are three averos a Jew has to give up their life for. Okay? There's one exception, which the Gemara in Sanhedrin says. The Gemara says that bishas hashmad, at a time of religious persecution, so the Gemara says, afilu arkesa de mesana, even for a black shoelace, which the commentators explain means, right, even if the non-Jews wear a certain kind of shoelace and the Jews, for a certain reason, don't wear that shoelace, and they force you to wear this shoelace because it's going to associate, it's part of the religious persecution that's going to make you more not Jewish, you have to give up your life for that. So that is one exception to the general rule of the big three, which is any Avera, right? So if they say eat pig, and I want you to eat the pig because I'm gunning down Judaism right now, so you have to give up your life for that. So if he sees it like that, that's another possibility. It's nothing to do with avodah zarah. It's just not kosher food. But he sees this as an attack on the Judaism, and it's what's called sha'as hashmad. And for sha'as hashmad, a person must give up their life.
Now, is that even like, so normally sha'as hashmad is like, what is a shema on the tzibur?
Right.
But over here, clearly the Jews, clearly it says nowhere in Tanakh that during this period that he had control of Jerusalem or over the kings, and they were puppet kings, before that, it doesn't say anywhere that he forced them to stop practicing Judaism.
That's a good point.
So it means so it would only be something that Daniel thinks that particularly because he's trying to make him Babylonian, it's only him and his friends or the people here.
I would agree with that. I think that's very accurate. Correct. Right. This is not like, a Shas Hashmad, like a complete mass, country Hanukkah, who's coming in, right? Like Hanukkah story. Right. It's not like that. And again, I guess we'd have to, if we want to spend more time analyzing Shas Hashmad and say, does this really fall into the category? Maybe, maybe not. And maybe perhaps Daniel at least feels that way. I don't know.
Maybe it could be a category for you. Like, I'm not saying it's not on all Jewish people, but these people are being, this group of people are being targeted to give up their Judaism. It could just be even on one person.
I don't see why not. Yeah. I mean, that would make sense to me. It's mistaber. Yeah. So the third possibility is that it's just not kosher. And why doesn't he want to do it? The answer is because he says, lo yizgal, I don't want to defile myself. And he's saying, this is a line in the sand that I'm not willing to cross. And I'm choosing. If it's going to mean my life, then so be it. But that's not something I'm doing.
Right. Now, Rambam can't hold like that.
Correct. Very,
Rambam holds you're not allowed to do it.
okay, good. So this is, so what Ari's pointing out is, there's a big machlokas. Machlokas between Rambam and Tosfos, which is, if it's not Shas Hashmad, and someone says to me, eat pig, I pull the trigger. So we know I don't have to eat the pig, right? I'm sorry. We know that I don't have to give up my life, right? I'm allowed to say, fine, great, give me the pig, I'll eat it. The question is, what if I say, am I allowed to say, I don't want to, so be it, so kill me, that's fine. So am I allowed to say such a thing? So this is a machlokas between Rambam and Tosfos. Rambam says, like Ari said, that you are not allowed to do that. And Tosfos says, if you want to, you can. It's your choice. It's your choice. If you want to stand by that and lose your life, so be it, that's fine. Rambam says, no, you can't. You can only give up your life for those three other things. You are mechuyav. You must eat the pig. Okay, fine. Okay, moving on. Let's take a look at Pasuk Yud Aleph. Vayomer Daniel al Meltzar. So this is why Daniel's rejecting the food. So Daniel now says to the Meltzar, who seems to be, Rashi says it's like the waiter. Okay, so before he went to the top dog, right, and he said, "Hey, I'm not going to eat this," and the guy says, "Look, it's between you and me, it's fine, but I can't. This is not going to work, right? Because the king's going to have my head." So now he goes to the Meltzar. Asher mina sar hasarisim al Daniel, Hananya, Mishael, Azariah. The guy, the secondary person, who was assigned to by the head person to wait on Daniel, Hananya, Mishael, Azariah to bring him food. And he says to him, "Look, I'll cut you a deal. Nas na es avodecha." Nas comes from like a test, right? Nisayon. Nas na es avodecha yamim asara. Let's do a test, a 10-day test. Vayitnu lanu min hazeroim. I want you to feed me these seeds. V'nochla mayim v'nishtat. Okay? We're going to go on a seed, bean type of, diet. Beans and water. Okay? Not the king's food, please. V'yera'u lefanecha mar'enu. Pasuk Yud Gimel. And then it will be presented to you our appearance. Umar'ei hayeladim ha'ochlim eis pas ba'ag hamelech. We'll do a test, a 10-day test, okay? And the trial will be at the end of it. We'll compare us against the other kids who are eating the king's food. V'chasher tir'eh aseh im avodecha. And whatever you see, we'll let time tell. Vayishma lahem ladavar hazeh. So the waiter says, deal, I'm up for this. Vayinasem yamim asara, and he tests them for 10 days. Please. That's a good point. So, right, it seems like initially you're picking up on a change, right? Meaning it seems like Daniel was clearly the one who initiated this, because at first it only points him out, and now you're right, he seems to be pulling Hanani, Mishael, Azariah. So I don't know. It's not clear whether he convinced them or whether they felt like this was the right thing to do, but only once they saw him do it. But yes, Daniel does seem to be kind of taking a lead here. They are still doing the right thing, but it seems like he's the one kind of guiding the ship. I think, unless you have yeah. Yeah, it does sound like that. It's a good ha'ara that it from that change.
Doesn't that show that it's not like a desire, more of like he put it on himself, he took it upon himself.
Good. I think that's that's definitely one possible way to read it. I think those who feel that it's avodah zarah, I think they'll say vayasam Daniel al libo means like he gave it intense thought, right? Like he put it on his heart, meaning he was contemplating, and eventually he comes to this conclusion. But I think the way you're saying it is also very, very reasonable too. If you say that it's not, it wasn't avodah zarah, then he's putting it on himself. I think that's an accurate way to
look at it. Even if it's avodah zarah, it doesn't mean that he feels that he can't do it. It sounds to me, I thought the pshat isn't about liba. It means he's coming up, he's thinking of a plan, strategize to get,
Oh, interesting.
Meaning, because even for the avodah zarah, if you can find a way to eat something else, if you can convince the minister to not, make him eat it or force him the choice, you're allowed to come up with a plan where you don't have to give up your life.
Excellent. Okay. That's a good way to look at it.
That's what I kind of thought he was doing.
That he's doing. Okay, fine. I think that's also a possibility. Good. Yeah, I think it's. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so 3 possible pshatim there for Vayasam Alibo. I think they're all definitely viable. Okay, so what happens? That was pasuk Yudal. Moving on to pasuk Tezvav. So they do the test, and what happens? And at the end of 10 days, near Amarhem Tov, Ubri'e Basar. It appeared that their appearance was Tov, Ubri'e Basar, and healthy. Min kol hayeladim ha'ochlim pasbak hamelach, more than all the other people, the other kids who were eating the pasbak. Vayihi hameltzar nosias pasbagam v'yein mishtehem. And the guy, I don't know why this pasuk is here exactly. It says, and he kept his word, and he was bringing the pasbagam to all the other people, and he's bringing the zeronim, the seeds, to Daniel and his friends. V'hayeladim ha'ele arbatam nasan lahem. Nasan lahem ha'elohim mada v'haskel b'chol sefer v'chachma. Hashem grants them great deep understanding in all areas of wisdom and knowledge. V'Daniel havin b'chol chazon v'chalomos. Okay, so here going back to what Ariel was asking before about Daniel being the lead, perhaps, or indicating that. So here you see again, right? It says Hashem granted them great wisdom. And Daniel, what? Daniel separated. And Daniel has some kind of deep understanding of, and that's going to be the key as the book goes on, as Sefer goes on, chazon v'chalomos, right? That he has some kind of, not just that he's smart and wise, but he has some kind of deep understanding of, dreams and things like that. So the time came, the king says to bring them, they're brought to Nebuchadnezzar. So the king speaks to them. So we've already established that in terms of health, they looked great. Now he speaks to them, and he sees that compared to the others, no one matches up. And they're standing there. Everything the Melech asks of them in terms of Chachma, they're on the mark. And it turns out that they're 10 times wiser than all of the magicians and all of the doctors and everyone else who's around in the king's court. They're the tops. And Daniel ends up staying there until the first year of Melech Koresh. Okay, so one point here that the Mefarshim deal with is, okay, so Daniel withstands this test and it seems to be successful. The question is did Hashem do a nace for Daniel? Right, he's eating, totally vegan. Okay, and the question is, but even more than that, right? I mean, he's just eating seeds and water for 10 days. So the question is, it sounds like Hashem is doing a nace for him, right? He really should have looked terrible, and he sizes up, and it's good compared to the others. So that's what Rav Sadia Gaon says. Rav Sadia Gaon says, yeah, it's Pasha. First of all, Daniel did a fantastic thing. He went out on either he went further than he had to in terms of risking his life. Or even if he didn't go further than he had to, he just did what was required. He risked his life because it was Avodah Zarah or because it was Shas Shmat. Okay, whatever it is, he went out and he did a great thing. And Hashem did something great for him. He did a miracle, and look, it worked out. So the Ibn Ezra says, very interesting. The Ibn Ezra says, it wasn't a nice, right? And he goes through a whole thing here about he gets into the whole thing on food, right? And he says no, it's Pasha. He was eating beans and water for 10 days. So of course, everyone knows that. And rice. I don't know how he came up with rice. He says rice is one of the words here. So he says, in Aramaic, this is Orez, whatever. So he says, the Ibn Ezra says in Pasuk Tezvav, he says, he was eating rice, beans, and water for 10 days. And of course, you're going to look great after 10 days. He says it was no miracle. It was just medical facts. That's it. And in which case, he's learning, and he quotes this Rav Sadia Gaon. He says, Rav Sadia Gaon says it was nice. I don't think it was nice. Not to take away in any way from what Daniel was doing. So he's not saying that Daniel didn't do something extraordinary. It was tremendous what he did, right? He committed to not being over, it was either Yarg or Yavor, or he went beyond and he didn't have to give up his life, but he chose to do it anyway. So that was fantastic. But in terms of what Hashem was doing, so the Ibn Ezra says it wasn't an ace, it was just natural medicine.
Yeah, but maybe for 10 days potentially, but after 3 years, you get no protein, you'd be as thin as a stick. Okay,
that's a good point, right? Meaning, what happened after those 10 days, right? Then the whole parak does that's kind of like a side point, right? It doesn't get to that, right? So that's a good point. Meaning, after that point, it's not clear. Legumes, beans.
Beans have protein?
Okay, for 3 years, who's up for it?
Is it 3? My question is
right? No, because right, it said there.
Beans, right? I mean, okay, so maybe meat is trick. Or maybe it's cooked like Maisel, that's official Akam or whatever, which I'm not sure if even the Xavier yet at this point, but like what exactly is the, the trade part? Like meat needs to be shepherded.
Good.
So, okay,
I'm
so
happy
he's not a shochet, nobody,
Good.
Babylonians aren't a shochet, that's trade. Or if there's other, but like, I don't know, bread is just like,
Thank
it's just pas aquam, but if they could, but if it, but technically speaking, bread is,
Okay.
and it wasn't, as far as I know, the Xer wasn't until Yitras Xer, whatever,
Correct.
not until, so, why is he outlawing bread then?
Okay, good. So,
You
right.
have
So
other things,
you have to follow up on that or different?
Is it possible to say that Daniel is thinking that the reason behind their feeding them this like, king's food was, well, if you feed them for 3 years and you teach them, so obviously they're all about like the body, and they're like, well, if it's proper nutrition, you're going to feed them well, and then they'll be able to be smarter. Daniel was like, well, that's not true. It's really up to Hashem if you're smart or not. So he's like, I'll prove it to you, and he goes on to eating seeds
And saying it's not about that. Yeah, I think
I don't
that.
know.
Yeah, that's Mustafa. That's Mustafa. I think so. To get back to Ari's point about what exactly was the trait part of it. So the word pasbag, right? The word pas often means bread, right? Pas is bread. So some of Farshim say, going back to our question, was it according to some, it was a Maichal Avodah Zarah. According to others, it was just stam, not kosher. Some kind of tavshil, Rashi says. According to others, if you say it's pasbag, it's just bread. So you have Ari's question, right? Bread is not treif, right? It's not treif, it's flour and water. And what was the other thing? What was the drink? The drink was wine, right? Wine is also kosher, unless it was poured for Avodah Zarah, but if it's not, then it's fine. So this is already starting to allude to what Ari was saying, which we know comes up later, which we have now, which are 3 things which are all instituted midrabanan, right? The Rabbanan instituted that a Jew cannot eat what's called bishul akum, right? Bishul akum is my maid is not Jewish and she cooks for me noodles, right? So it's kosher, but she cooked it. That's bishul akum. Number 2, stam yenam. Stam yenam means wine, which was touched by a non-Jew. Number 3, pasakum, right? Which is bread cooked by a non-Jew, also kosher, but baked by a non-Jew. So all these 3 things, the Gemara says, the Chazal eventually did outlaw. And the reason for the outlaw was because they saw all 3 of, at least 2 of them, the bread and the wine was done because they felt like it was going to influence social, mixing and a social closeness that was going to end up down the wrong road and eventually to intermarriage. And the bishul akum, it's not clear whether it was because they thought maybe they would stick something treif in there, or it was also some kind of gzeira to distance us from them. But all these things are not usher by the Torah. It's clearly not at the same level of not kosher. It's all midrabanan. So some of Farshim say that this is the beginning of, it's not the gzeira of it, but perhaps Chazal, when they made the gzeira, they see a precedent for it here. Right? Now, it's true. Daniel's not making this gzeira for Klal Yisrael, right? He's not a Sanhedrin. He's just taking this upon himself. But again, that could be a precedent for this gezer, which Chazal end up implementing. But like you're saying, Ari, it wasn't implemented at this point. This point, it would not have been usher. So again, that would be, if you take that route, that again kind of goes with the, again, it's a little bit less than the not kosher issue, but it's not out of the, it's out of the Avodah Zarah realm. It's grouped with this thing that he's taking it upon himself. Not, and it's
Clearly,
not,
then this would be more than like, it wouldn't be, even if you say it's shashmad, or you thought we saw it as being shmad, would that, that would even be something that's not, with the Ark of Damascene, which is not really allowed. So then it would.
correct. But the same halach would apply for Shas Shema. It would be the same. Correct. Okay. You're saying, why would we believe that?
Why would we think based on the pasuk that it was anything but not kosher?
So I think the reason is because, okay, so bag, I mean, I don't know what the word, the Mefarshim are trying to figure out the word bag means because it doesn't come up anywhere, right? But the word pas is bread.
Yeah, but there's not words.
Right, you're saying, so what's the other mysterious word? Right. If it was just pas, then we would say bread and call it a day. Right. That's a good point. That pas, right? Aaron Leib is saying that pas could just be, in general, Chazal sometimes refer to pas as food, right? Which maybe then that's where Rashi's coming from. Rashi says it's tavshil, just some kind of dish.
Oh, I mean, you find chumash that lechem because sometimes it's referred to a carbon, even though it's clearly not bread.
Not bread, yeah.
So the word pas could just mean.
Could mean
meal.
food, yeah, meal. Okay, so that's what we have. So that's
Actually, I
that.
was kind of asking,
Yeah.
why did he choose to have,
Their own as opposed to.
seeds, not according to the Evan Ezra who says that this is magical and this is healthy, it's fine. But according to this Rasaji who says that this is like not a very good diet, why couldn't he, why when the one Daniel, he could have asked for, let's say, pas or something that, there's other options, even if,
That's a good point. It's a valid point. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see it being this, yeah.
dates are kosher and a lot of things you can eat that are common above.
Right, so I don't know how much, right.
Maybe it includes those things, I don't know.
Yeah, it's possible. I don't know. Yeah.
Also kind of Potiphar, Lechem referred to Potiphar's wife. So.
Right, correct. You see that it's not always, yeah. Okay. So that's Perek Aleph. So that's essentially the first of Daniel's ordeals, right? Is essentially this test of the kosher or the food issue, which he kind of, sets up that he's not going to cross that line. And we have this machlokes again between the Ibn Ezra and Rav Sadia, and whether this was really an ace or whether this was just natural. But the point is, either way, he really, withstood the test. So we already see here, by the way, there's a theme which is pointed out later, not by the Mefarshim on the page at all, but there's a big parallel drawn between Daniel and Yosef HaTzadik. And we're going to see this a few times as we go on. So I'll point them out as we see them. In Perek Aleph, we already see a few. So first of all, the parallel starts, once you see the parallels, you kind of work backwards and you say, okay, what is the common thing between Daniel and Yosef HaTzadik? So they are both essentially like, they are the Jew in Galus, essentially, right? That Yosef HaTzadik is the first Jew in Galus coming down from Mitzrayim. And now Daniel here as well, right? He's a Jew from Yehuda in Galus. And as opposed to
but like on top, like in the king.
Oh, very good. So that's the next step. So not only are they a Jew and Galus, they both share this idea. They both share this quality that that we're going to see soon when Daniel with the dreams as well. But they both do something which rises them to a certain level of power. Okay. Number 3. Yosef HaTzadik, we know, is given a name by Paro, right? It says he changed his name to Tzafnas Panech, revealers of the secrets. And Daniel we have here as well, right? Changed his name, right, to Belshazzar, some idol. And then, obviously, there's not going to be later in the Sefer where Daniel doesn't have any kind of nisayon in terms of like Eshes Potiphar, like Yosef did. Although if you go with the Ibn Ezra, not even with Ibn Ezra, it's clear that he's a youth, right? So it's interesting when you think about it, you say, well, he didn't have that nisayon, but he might not necessarily be in that stage of life for that to be a nisayon, right? So perhaps what would the counter and the parallel nisayon be for someone of that age? So in his case, it's the food, right? So Yosef is faced with this nisayon of Eshes Potiphar. Daniel's faced with a nisayon on his level, and he nails it. So just a few, and those don't have anything to do, there's no like linguistic. Very good. Oh, thank you. I missed that one. Excellent. Right. So there also, right? Yosef is described, right, as Yefei Mara, right? Yeah. And Yefei Tar B'Fas Mara, I think. And Daniel's described as that as well here. Okay. Wait, who? Right, correct. It does say Yeladim, but then also you have at the end when it says when they brought him to Nebuchadnezzar, it says Umixas Yama Masara Nir'em Mar'ehem Tov. Right, they were Mar'ehem Tov from all the other ones. So there's clearly and we're going to see it.
More like the Pharaoh's dream, like the camel, right?
Okay, good.
The cows,
Okay, so this is interesting also, and I don't know what to make of this. I'll share it with you. Perhaps someone come up with something as we go along. You will see there are a lot of also parallels in terms of the Lashonos that are used by Daniel are very similar to the Lashonos that are used by Paro. Not necessarily in terms of like conceptually, like here, like Daniel is a Jew in Galus who's rising to power. That's more of a conceptual idea. But in terms of the like the Lashon, like Ari's saying, first of all, Yosef is described as Yefei Torah B'Fas Mara. I think he's described like that as well as Rachel. But the cows are also described as Tovei Mara. Okay, and there's going to be a few others where like they're just the words line up very well. Okay, yeah, Brios Buster, yeah. Okay, so let's start Perek Beis, because Perek Beis is really going to be a lot for next week. And here's where the Aramaic begins. So In the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, and the Mefarshim deal with this, the dates here are a little bit tricky because if you match them up, you'll see that they don't seem to add up. So they say it can't really be a second year because of other things, but I don't think we're going to get into that. If you want to talk to me afterwards, I'm happy to discuss it with you, but I don't want to go in that direction for now. We'll just say it's the second year of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar has chalomos. He has these dreams. So here's the other parallel to Paro, right? The king's having dreams. Vatispaem rucho. And he's agitated, right? The only other time in Tanakh where you have, right, Vatipaem Rucho is by Paro, right? There's one other time, I think it says it by Shimshon. It says Vatipaem Rucho when he, before the fire, it says Vatipaem Rucho by Shimshon also, in Sefer Shoftim. But it's not talking about a dream, right? He never dreamed. So it's other, he was agitated about something. So Paro and Nebuchadnezzar, both of them, agitated. Ushnaso niyasalav, and he's having trouble sleeping. This part I'll read because it's in Hebrew, as soon as we hit the Aramaic, we'll skip. So same thing, like Paro, right? He calls the Chartumim, and the doctors, and the magicians, and the stargazers. Okay, so they're brought there. And he says, now what does he say? I'm agitated. Okay, so here's where things switch from Paro. So Vayidabru hakazdim lamelech aramis, and now they speak to him in Aramaic. And now we enter Aramaic lands for the next 5 paragraph. So they say, look, why don't you tell us what the dream is? So go to Pasuk Hey, I'll read it inside. I'll try to pick the psukim that bring something out or that have a little bit more similarity to Hebrew. Pasuk Hey. So they say, what's the problem, dear king? So Nebuchadnezzar says, Anei Malka, Anei from like Ana, to answer. Anei Malka, the king answered, Va'amar lekazda'e, and he says to them, Milsa mini azda, right? I can't remember the dream, right? I lost it. Hein la sahodu'unani chelma upishrei. Whoever cannot inform me, not just of the meaning of the dream, but of what the dream was. Hadamin tis avdun. If you cannot tell me that, you will be chopped to pieces. Ubatechon, and bias, right? Your houses, nivali Yist Samun will be smashed. So everyone's dead. If you can't tell me A, the dream, because I can't remember it, and B, you have to also tell me the interpretation of the dream. Okay. And then he says, V'hein Pasuk Vav, V'hein Chalmo Pishrei Ta'achavon, and the person who can share with me the dream, Chalma Upishrei, and its interpretation, Matanan, from Matana, Matanan Univizba V'yikar Sagi. I will give them great presents, lots of riches, and wonderful things. Tikablun min kadamai, they will get from me. Lahain chalma upishrei hachavoni. Okay, so please tell me what it is. So now the next few psukim, all these people who are standing there basically say to him, "You're nuts," right? In a kind way, right? They say like, "Come on, that's just not logical. Like, at least can you get us started with the dream? Like, what you're asking us is something that you would not ask anyone at all, ever." Okay, no normal person would make such a request, so you're being completely unreasonable. Okay, let's take a look. Pasuk Yud to point that out. Anag Hazdei, they respond. Kadam al Kava Amrin. Pasuk Yud. They say to the king, "La itai enash al yabeshta." No enash, no person. Al yabeshta, the yabasha, on dry land. Di milas malka yuchal lahachavaya would be able to do what you're asking. Kol kavel di kol melech rav v'shalit mina kedana la she'el l'chol chartom ve'ashaf v'kazdai. No other king would ever ask such a ridiculous thing. The Medrash in the Medrash on Chumash, it's interesting. They say if you were you could not ask this of any man, of any person. So the Medrash says that what they're alluding to is says they're saying to him, hint hint. They say, if we had a Kohen Gadol, right? If those Jews had this priest, right? We know they have the whole magical thing going on with the breastplate. They probably could figure out what you need to know, right? But now there's no person to, right? They're referring to the Medrash sees like the Ish is referring to the Kohen Gadol. Obviously, probably because he's referring to Ish in some concepts. So the Medrash says they're hinting to that concept. They're saying like, you've done this to yourself now. There's no one around. You're asking something ridiculous, and frankly, no one possibly can solve this problem. And the only person who could have ever solved it is gone because of you. Okay. Okay, let's just read just one more pasuk Yud Beis, and then we'll stop. Kol kavel. Okay, kol kavel denama. No, fine. That's good enough. I mean, we got the basic idea. So essentially, this parak is divided up into 4 parts. We did the first part. Okay, the first part is his dream. The second part is Daniel, which we're going to see in pasuk Yudalid, is Daniel saying maybe I could interpret it and how he goes about that. And we're going to have to see that next week. Basically, what ends up happening is he says, everyone's sentenced to death row, right? So everyone's on death row because everyone says, well, we don't know, you're asking something unreasonable, we can't do it. So he says, fine, death to everyone. And only at that point then does Daniel speak up. And Daniel says, maybe I can help. So the Mepharshim we'll talk about next week. The Malbim discusses like why he waits till then. Like why didn't he just say like, oh, I think I can help? Right? He waits like till everyone's gonna be dead. Then he says, oh, I think I can help at this point. So Daniel's gonna offer to help. That's part 2 of the parak. Part 3 is gonna be Daniel telling him what the dream was. So we have to find out what is the dream. And then the part that will really be interesting is to get into is what does the dream represent? Once he gets the dream, it's kind of, the Mepharshim already say like, once you have the dream, it's kind of, there are arrows pointing in the direction of what it probably means. So that was the hard part was to get the dream, which obviously Hashem granted him that Ruach HaKodesh to do so. And the fourth part is then again, what does it represent? So hope to come back next week for hearing our dream, number 1 of Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah.
Since he doesn't remember his dream, they can tell him anything.
Okay.
So just a question, he just know, even though it's not it.
So good. Okay. So so Rashi, I think Rashi says here, some of the Mepharshim say, I think they say the pshat is, right? Ari's asking if he doesn't know the dream, so he can make up anything and get away with murder, right? So some of Mepharshim say, I think a similar thing, I think they say it's by Paro also, right? That he dreamt the dream and the meaning of the dream, right? By Paro they say, right? Let's go. Was it Sarah Mashma, Sarah Ofen, or by Paro? I thought they say, because what happened? By Paro, right? By Paro, was it Sarah Mashma, Sarah Ofen, or Paro?
I don't know.
One of them they say that when they were told the interpretation, they said, no, get out of here, get out of here, get out of here. And then Yosef, he said, that's it.
Yeah.
So what's the pshat? He says, that's it. So I thought, don't some of our say that he said, that's what it was. It triggered something. So I think unless I'm making it up, I thought some people say that here, that the word is he doesn't know. He says, I don't know what it was. But as soon as they say something, he sees oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I think it was that. You're right, Taka.
Or maybe he
But unless
doesn't remember clearly, but
he remembers
something.
parts of it.
So if they start talking about something that's clearly he has no memory of,
Then he
they
dismisses
don't
it.
want to take a chance.
Right.
Because
Right.
they
It's
feel
interesting, right?
He may remember bits and pieces, just not the whole.
But not the whole thing. Yeah, it's interesting. You're pointing. He doesn't. It doesn't seem like anyone even tries, right? They just say, "You're being ridiculous. Hands up. We're done." Right? We fold. And they don't seem to even. Right? They don't seem to even attempt it. So we'll see what the dream is and Daniel's.
Second year, I have no idea. Yeah.
So